This is today's News Talk TNT.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hour number 2, this live broadcast. Appreciate you guys rejoining us. We're going to do a little turn back to the U.S., but we're not going to be talking about only U.S. issues. Of course, we'll talk about the foreign policy theater as well, how this relates to the current crisis, the political crisis in the United States right now. We talked about this incredible debate circus last week. The political fallout from it, however, is still ongoing. Let's bring Niko House onto the line right now. Niko is with Hotspot Media. Niko, I don't need to tell you what happened last week, but I would like to know your thoughts about, what do you make of it and what is going to happen next? Because a lot of people don't seem to know. I know somebody must know in a decision-making position somewhere in the elite recesses of the Democratic Party or Washington, but I certainly can't tell exactly what's going to happen. What do you make of this incredible situation?
Well, for one, I can tell you, I don't know where to start because let's just go back to the debate format itself. There were no notes allowed. Pat, did you know that? That was agreed upon by both candidates before going into the debate. Why would you send Joe Biden, of all people, into a debate against Donald Trump with absolutely no data, no statistics, no proof of anything that he may or may not have done during his presidency? So I was not at all surprised whenever we hear things like we won the fight against Medicare for all. He literally had nothing to work with. So everything that happened after, I believe, is most of the Democrats' fault. And everything that happened before really could have, if they would have made the right moves, they could have prevented where they've arrived at, which is trying to figure out who's the least likely to lose against Donald Trump going forward. Because when you have CNN, you have Jake Tapper, for example, coming out and saying, the Democrats don't want you to believe what you saw with your very own eyes. You have Nancy Pelosi coming out and saying it's legitimate to question whether or not this is an episode or condition from what we saw from Biden during the debate. We have a Trump video that leaked where he was like, they're getting him on up out of there. And, Kamala is light work for him, which, by the way, I don't believe was a leak. I believe it was strategic. I believe he did it on purpose. He sees the news. He knows what's going on. He had somebody in his camp record it, and he leaked it to see what the reaction to the Democrats would be, to see if it puts any more pressure on them to make a decision going forward. You have Biden's family pressuring him into staying, but you have the Democratic Party pressuring him into getting out. So what I've taken away from all of this is that it's pure chaos, but he will be swapped out at the convention. And some people have seemed to have forgotten that Democratic Party made it very clear. Some people are saying, man, the voters have already decided. Yeah, okay, and what does that mean? There's a convention. They swap out candidates all the time at the convention. You can go all the way back to Henry Wallace. We don't even have to go to Bernie Sanders. They swapped out Henry Wallace after he won. Okay, after he had been vice president for 3 terms. Okay, so that's what I see coming, and I don't believe it was a coincidence. Nancy Pelosi, a super delegate for California, came out and made it clear that they're questioning Biden's mental capacity, because we know in that particular situation where Nancy Pelosi goes, the rest of the super delegates in California will go. So I believe it's clear the switch is in.
With this last minute switch, Niko, is that going to give Democrats the time to rally the support they need behind whoever that is? Will this work in their favor? Will it ignite the base, or are they just so behind the 8 ball at the moment with this whole Biden debacle that they're really going to be sort of pissing against the wind, so to speak?
Definitely pissing against the wind. This is the worst concoction of incompetence and corruption that I have ever seen in my life since I've been observing politics. Because obviously, we know they set their primary up so that not only would Biden win, but they would almost punish you for participating, right? So we know that the fix had been in for Biden from the beginning. They had not put any real effort or allowed any other Democratic primary challenger to at least get some attention so that people know where they stand if this situation were to occur, which was extremely likely. It was almost, the Democrats back in the day were smarter, right? There's a reason that they switched out Henry Wallace overnight, because Henry Wallace was completely and totally avowed socialist. He was extremely popular. Everybody knew that when FDR died, Henry Wallace was going to take over. And this is a guy who came out and was like, yeah, we're going to pull all of our money from assisting the UK and other Western European people or powers maintain their colonies in Africa. We're going to desegregate. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And they were smart enough to realize, now we got to get him out, because they understood the condition FDR was in. The Democrats actually convinced themselves, they drank their own Kool-Aid. They actually convinced themselves that Biden's mental state was not slipping, even though we just witnessed this for the last 3.5 years. So now you're in a situation where you have to find somebody who's popular enough that they can beat Trump, which, and let's be clear, this is the most popular incumbent to have ever lost. That's Trump, guys. I mean, he literally increased his voter block amongst all demographics except for white men, which was kind of peculiar, but whatever. That's what they're working against. We don't even know if he legitimately lost to this day. We don't know. And so you got to somehow find a candidate to do that, but also doesn't have a legacy that's going to leave them high and dry if there is too much time to do deep investigations and expose their career. And that person doesn't exist, Pat.
And we talked about this in the previous hour. And, I look at this as the kind of, legacy of this untoward candidacy of Joe Biden in 2020. A lot of question marks back then about who really would support this guy. Seemed to be behind until about 3 a.m. on election night in a couple of key swing states. Now we get Joe Biden first term. I wouldn't exactly call it a success by anybody's measure. If you look at where the world is at, where the U.S. is at, where we're at in terms of foreign policy, the risks right now of World War III, and then we see this just disintegration of this man in front of the country on the world stage. It's almost like a national humiliation for the U.S. as a global hegemon. I don't know what other way to put it, Niko. I mean, how does the world look at this? I mean, you're an international person, and you travel. What is the feeling in South America, for instance?
It's embarrassing, Pat.
Looking at the U.S.
It's embarrassing to be. I got to walk around Brazil explaining to people in a foreign language. I don't know, guys. I don't know how we got here. I can't explain to y'all how we got there. My wife doesn't speak English, Pat, and she was watching the debates with me because I had it on in the background. She was like, "Is he supposed to be stuttering like that? Why does he look like he doesn't know what he's doing? Why is he taking such long pauses and just staring out into space?" So for a person that couldn't even speak English, she could perceive that there was something off about this man. And I was like, well, that's because she wasn't paying attention at first until I started laughing. And she was like, what's going on? And because she didn't realize that Biden was our president. She had never actually looked at him before. She just was like, oh, okay, it's a president in the U.S., whatever. They don't have control over anything anyway. But then she actually took a look at him and was like, hold on, y'all let this man be president? Y'all voted for him? How long has he been like this? I said, since he was elected? I said, now you understand why I'm so frustrated all the time? Now you understand why I live in Brazil. The perception is not only is Biden a horrible president, but it's almost an indictment of the citizens of the United States. Because how could we have gotten to a point? How could we have allowed us to get to a point where Biden was even an option? Right. And it's not just a Republican versus Democrat thing. It's as a country. Where did we go wrong that our only two options were a demented Biden and a Trump who can't actually remember which lie to tell on which day in front of which crowd? Like, that's basically what it boils down to. This man talking about he's going to fight Big Pharma. He's taking money from Big Pharma. And it's Mr. Operation Warp Speed himself. Right. So this is our options. And at a certain point, we do have to take accountability because we did let it get this bad.
And the other thing is the break with tradition. You said the Democratic primaries, they basically destroyed the, tradition of having normal primaries, even if it's an incumbent, and you sort of, tick the box or punch the machine or whatever. They basically said you can't vote. They turned it to a write-in campaign. just to keep, in my mind, to keep any challengers out. Yours as well. RFK Jr. was running as a Democrat, not after that. Then they moved the debates before the convention. I mean, is that not a dead giveaway that something very odd is afoot right now? You can't have presidential debates before the DNC and RNC conventions.
Strange, it's one of the strangest things that I've seen. I actually talked about it on my show. I said, you guys know that, so the CNN made the rules all of a sudden. Before it was, we had to follow the Constitution. Then it was, they had a general set of rules where you had to get a certain percentage, right, of on a certain amount of polls. RFK actually checked all those blocks. But then CNN decided to add an extra set of rules, which was that you had to have a certain amount of guaranteed delegates for your, but they forgot the part where, like, the Democrats can switch and superdelegates haven't been counted yet. And there's nobody who's been officially nominated for anything. So those pledged delegates, which we've seen in conventions in the past, don't actually have to pledge until there's a nominee to pledge for. In other words, no one has delegates. That's the best way I can put it.
Yes.
And yet they use this as a random metric to determine whether or not you can be on the debate stage in order to keep RFK Jr. in this particular case off of the debate stage. Then there's also the fact that there's the United States pretends it's a democracy, a representative democracy or whatever. And you had to basically pay, Pat, to watch the debate. You had to have cable. You had to be paying for HBO Max, or you could have done some like 3-day trial for DirecTV if it was available to you. That's democracy. These two men would determine the future of our country. One of them will be the president on January 20th. And you have to pay in order to view it. And if you stream it, God forbid you're an independent news outlet that streamed it, you would be punished as if you were stealing some artist's music, right? Like, that is insanity. That is not a democracy. I mean, we've gone into a full-blown technocracy and a we've gone full-blown fascism. And it's kind of creepy to me how a lot of people still can't see it.
Yeah, and that's another thing is CNN also. I don't think they allowed the press in the room. The press were like across the street in another building. There was no audience at this debate. You said there were no notes allowed. I mean, what was this other than a planned takedown of Joe Biden? Is this what CNN was engineering there? Because it certainly looked like it.
Yeah, it did look like it. It looked like they were trying to take down Biden. And even though they always come out with the Trump lied however many times, at a certain point, I can't even get mad at Trump for lying or misleading his audience, because when you are president or when you're trying to run for president, and even Biden to some degree, how can you possibly keep track of every single data point that you were involved in as president for a debate without notes? It's hard for me. I'm young. I've debated half of my life, Pat, and I still need notes whenever I'm going into a debate. They set up Biden and Trump thinking that it would make Biden look bad. The format would make Trump not look bad, but it wouldn't allow him to be as aggressive as he would normally be. And that they would assume, my assumption is, they would assume that Biden would maintain his composure and look more presidential. But in the reality, it was worse, because maybe if Trump was interrupting Biden more, Biden might have been more engaging. But because there was nothing to stop him, nothing to interrupt him, he was just interrupted by his own silence, right? And it made him come off as senile, demented. And when we're in a position where you got Joanne Reed now come out and saying she would vote for Biden as a corpse rather than vote for Hitler. Like I said, what are we doing, guys? How do we get here? I get genuinely confused, Pat. I get so upset, man. I'm 35. I'm like, I wasn't here long enough maybe to see how it all started, but damn, how do we get here?
Well, it seems like nobody's interested in the issues in a real serious way. No one's interested in the ideas that are being put forward. All people are interested is in power. And it seems like, from the Democrat point of view, deploying the Department of Justice and the courts to basically tie Donald Trump down in 100 different legal cases during the election cycle, quite obviously to try to take him out of the race. Now they want to yank Biden because they realize they're now admitting that he's cognitively impaired. It seems like on so many different junctures, the party in power or the establishment does not want to have a normal election. Forget about who's running. They just do not want to have a normal election because they're afraid of what the results might be. That's kind of what it looks like. And to me, that's a total defeat for democracy in America. So this is truly a post-democratic era that we are, the real swamp that we are wading into right now. Niko, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, going back to when you said it doesn't even matter who's running, because to some degree, Trump getting immunity for what he did as president, although I don't believe he actually did anything wrong in that particular aspect of his presidency. I believe that he exercised his right as president to try and challenge the election. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. However, the fact that they said he had immunity as president was a little bit bothersome because he did a lot of illegal stuff while he was president. And that sets a bad precedent going forward for everybody. If you can be, if they perceive that you have certain immunity as president, that is a precedent going forward. That doesn't bother me regarding Trump specifically. It bothers me regarding every other president. Okay, so we have that going. We have that problem that we have to deal with now, in the same vein as a DNC fraud lawsuit, where they basically allowed them to rig the elections because look what they did again. Right, we've arrived at find out. Right, unfortunately, then you have Biden, which I mean he's a corpse at this point. Joe Biden should be arrested and taken into prison and put in prison for elderly abuse at this point, right after Biden goes to prison for war crimes. And we don't have, it's like they're setting a weird precedent on how we should expect elections to go going forward. These type of elections, this is what they've always claimed elections in, like places like Colombia or like El Salvador. They claim elections in Russia or the Eastern Bloc during the end of the fall of the Soviet Union, excuse me. Like, this is what they claim those elections were like. But to some degree, ours is worse. Ours is worse because we have access to all the information, Pat. Okay? We have access to all the independent journalists. We have the benefit of hindsight. We have the benefit of watching this man's mental health deteriorate right in front of our face. They had the benefit of watching Donald Trump once again, not only pass Operation Warp Speed, but staying behind it, would say everything about and boast about passing it. We got Bernie Sanders betraying his base. We got Tulsi betraying her base. We have all this stuff playing out right in front of us. And we're still not, they're not out in the streets burning the cities down, burning the states down, burning these Capitol buildings down in each major capital around the country. I've seen France raise hell for less. Like Frenchmen raise hell for far less than what we're witnessing right now in our country. And it's a little concerning to me. And I get it, Americans are tired, but the problem is we're not going to stop being tired until we do something about it. So at a certain point, you got to just, I hate to use this term, but you got to pull up your bootstraps and go take your damn country back.
And what isn't it what they've engineered here this last week, where we're all talking about the media, the political conversations, all about Joe Biden, Trump. Is Joe going to run? He's going to be replaced? Well, I'll pull this image up on screen here. This is Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris. These are two names that are being hotly tipped as the sort of replacement, as it were, at the DNC convention. And we got Gavin Newsom. I'll throw him up on screen as well. Governor of California. That's another name that's come in there. So a lot of talk about musical chairs, but nobody's talking about Israel, Palestine, Gaza, Ukraine. We have two legitimate World War III potential flashpoints, and CNN has brilliantly gaslit the public away from talking about issues in a serious way. And all we're talking about is Biden's mental state, which is no surprise to anybody that's been paying attention for the last 4 years. But that's where they've got us. pigeonholed right now. I mean, that to me is a huge victory for the mainstream media on this, Niko.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct, because you got the situation in Ukraine where Zelensky tried to come in and say, I'm ready for peace talks. NATO said, nah, we're actually going to put an official in Ukraine to make sure that we can continue to send aid there without Trump interfering, which effectively sabotages all peace talks, and then turns around and denies Ukraine membership in the NATO, which is the whole reason the war was started to begin with, which is, I mean, that's just like ironic in and of itself. But now there seems to be no way out for Zelensky and no way out for Ukraine. They're going to fight to the last man, whether they want to or not. They're slowly realizing it is not their war, it's NATO's. And then the situation with Palestine, just yesterday, the Israeli government decided, in order to punish Palestinians because a few countries decided to recognize Palestine as an official state, they're about to annex almost the entirety of the West Bank. All you can see is Final Solution blinking in a big, bright red light. It's obvious what they're doing. And they made it very clear. Yeah, we want to make it as least likely for them to achieve a Palestinian state as possible. The Israeli finance minister said this. Yeah, with zero shame. Okay. There are major World War III-esque situations happening in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, between Israel and Palestine, and people are drawing their lines in the sand. And like you said, we're talking about Biden's mental health when we should have never arrived at this point anyway. He should have been taken out of office. He should have never been allowed to run for office. But, after plagiarizing, and you thought that would have been the thing that takes him out, or sexual assault against Sarah Reid, or the sabotage where he tried to basically claim that Anita Hill was a liar in order to help uplift Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court. I mean, any of these things, because he ran more than once and everybody seems to forget that. There was a reason we didn't pick him before. But now we got the 3 years of mental health. We all had every opportunity to help him bow out gracefully, and it wouldn't have been an embarrassment, Pat. He could have actually retired, and people would have had respect for him for doing so, and probably even more respect for the Democratic Party. And you could have began working on a plan to get Trump out in a legitimate way. But the problem is, like I said before, Pat, they have no one else to protect them and shield them from the consequences of their corruption. He is the last powerful Democrat. There is no one else that can win, that can shield them. There are other Democrats that might be able to compete after Donald Trump per se, but there's no one that can shield them from what they're doing right now. And they pissed off possibly the most vindictive man in the history of politics.
Yeah. He's a made man, as they say, like in the mafia. And it's a great explanation, Niko. He's the only person who can basically stop the reckoning from happening about all the corruption. That's a very good way to put it. But wouldn't it be great, Niko, in the debate if Jake Tapper or Dana Bash said, President Biden, what is your position on Israel wanting to annex the West Bank? And then see what Donald Trump's going to say publicly. And let's see if there's any difference in their understanding of this issue, because somebody might vote for Biden on that West Bank issue alone if they're a single issue voter. But we were denied any of the chance to see what their beliefs were, what their ideas, do they understand this issue or not? Putting them on the spot, that didn't happen. That to me is a massive missed opportunity, among other missed opportunities there. But that's totally out of the question. Instead, we got this, I don't know what this display was, this performative circus was.
Theaters. I don't know what else. They didn't even ask about Assange. Assange's case was a case that both administrations were involved in, right? Trump reignited the situation with Chelsea Manning in order to get information on Assange, and his administration pulled him out of the Ecuadorian embassy. The Biden-Obama administration was the reason that he was in the Ecuadorian embassy to begin with. And then the Biden administration forced him to take this plea deal and basically had him held up for an additional 3 years. Trying to run his clock out, thank God he's out. Thank God he's free. But they tried to run his clock out, but they were unsuccessful in that regard. But they still were able to get a plea deal out of him, which disallows him from suing for wrongful imprisonment, and also puts an enormous debt on top of his head, where it's going to be difficult to restart his life without a lot of help from the public. So they should have been forced to answer to that, right? How do you feel about this situation with Assange? Do you feel like it was a victory for the country? Do you feel like that there was justification in imprisoning him? Why did you accept the plea deal if what he did was so grotesque and dangerous? They should have had a real conversation about that and what it means for journalism going forward. But they weren't forced to.
Because Biden could have put Trump on the spot, because it's the Trump administration that put the indictments on Assange. But that didn't happen. So, like, what was this all about? Exactly. It's incredible. Absolutely amazing. So, I mean, a lot of important points we're raising here, Niko. I hope, we hope that some of these important issues are going to trickle up to the top of the political conversation. I hope. It is an election cycle, a weird one at that, but there's still a few months left. I don't know. It's extremely strange, but I don't know what to call it. I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Pat, for us as independent journalists, we're supposed to be excited for this type of circus, but it's hard to get excited when you realize, like, oh man, like, is this basically what the fall of the Roman Empire looked like, but like with social media, so it's a little bit more entertaining? Like, it's the fall of the Roman Empire, but with memes, basically, and we're watching it play out in real time. And I don't know where this is going to end up, because, like, Putin is not playing, and Xi Jinping is also making it very clear he's not playing either. BRICS is becoming a force to be reckoned with. People are choosing sides. Americans, unfortunately, they're starting to feel the same anxiety that people from countries all over the world feel, which is the feeling that you have when your country is choosing a side and you actually have no power to control which side they choose. And that is how it feels to be in Iraq, to be in Afghanistan, to be in Colombia, Argentina, these countries where the United States is effectively controlling the outcomes of not only their economies, but the wars fought in and out of their countries. So, like, now you guys get it. Now you guys understand, like, we were able to reap the benefits of a country that ruled through fear, through power, through corruption, through money. And now we're on the receiving end. And a lot of Americans are coping in whatever way they can, but a lot of it is, you can sense the anxiety, right? There are people that are profiting, but it's few and far between that are profiting off of this. Most Americans are terrified and they just don't know what to do. And so a lot of them are just sitting back and watching and trying to prepare in the best way they can. But I hope what it actually leads to is people becoming more engaged finally and understanding that the duopoly, I don't care which candidate you think is worse, neither of them are good for you. You can admit which, if you think one is worse, but it's more important to understand that neither of them are good for you. We don't have a democracy. It is all theater. And once you arrive at that point, you'll be able to understand why it's so important that we start to fight for third-party candidates, regardless of whether or not you agree with them, to have their voices heard, so that we can actually begin to drive our country in a direction where we have some semblance of democracy. I don't expect it to ever be perfect, but what we have right now is a circus. But it's a service act where, like, imagine you're doing the trapeze, but everybody falls. Yeah, it's not entertaining. It's a circus act where everybody dies.
Niko House, go to X Twitter at real Niko House, Hotspot Media. You're putting out your sort of regular daily digest videos, Niko. You're taking very complex issues, boiling them into, I think, a very entertaining, engaging, energetic format there. And I think it's making a big difference in getting people to understand some of these difficult issues. You're doing a great job, and you and your team at Hotspot Media. I encourage people to follow you and give us a shout out on the various channels and platforms where you're posting right now, Niko.
I appreciate you. Like you said, at Real Niko House on Twitter, at Real Niko House on YouTube. No, you can just look up my name, NIKOHOUSC, on YouTube to look at my For the People podcast, at Real Niko House on TikTok and on Instagram as well. And of course on Roxanne and Rumble.
And Rockfin, and yeah, another great platform for independent content creators as well. Niko House, thank you very much for dropping in to talk to us on TNT this week. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, Pat.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Niko House. Again, we'll drop his social media channels into the TNT chat community. Do follow Niko, and especially the videos that he's dropping with Hotspot Media. Very informative and great material. Should be sharing with all your friends and contacts as well. Let's take a break and get back to things on the UK with Phil Zimmerman, with a rendition of his new song live here, premiering on the show. That's coming up in just a few minutes, so you don't want to miss that final segment coming up. Stay with us. We'll be right back.